Hello, crafting friends. It's Dorene Decibus from It Begins with Ink and Paper, and welcome to Simply Stamping Sunday. Oh, it's been a dreary, dreary weekend here in the Northeast with all of the hurricane-related storms. So we've certainly had it not be a fun, sunny fall weekend, though I am looking forward to those fun, sunny fall weekends. It's just so beautiful here where I live in New England, and I just can't wait for everything to start changing colors and and just the beauty that nature provides us in the Northeast. And speaking of the beauty that nature supplies for us in the Northeast, tonight is, our last night using the autumn leaf. At the end of the presentation, I'll show you what we're going to be using for the month of October, because believe it or not, next Sunday it's October 2nd. I'm getting the hiccups. Hopefully that will help. So I can't believe we're transitioning from September into October. Time just goes by so quickly. So let's review. So we're using our autumn leaf set tonight. So I'm just going to put that aside, back up on my shelf to have it out of the way. And let's just review the cards that we have been working on so far this month. So week 1, we did a just stamp ink to paper technique, put in a little bit of the designer series paper to have that copper, just that beautiful copper show up in the design. Then last week we actually made 2 cards. We let the designer series paper be the highlight of the card and made these 2 cards using the Cajun Craze ink and paper. And then we also did a bonus card, and we did a very similar layout to what we did with, I think it was in our July or August, where I showed you how you could do this kind of stamping where you stamp and then put a layer in between. It comes out kind of cool. So this was our bonus card last week. Well, this week I want to teach you a technique, and I want to teach you a fun fold at the same time. So the only additional thing that you're going to need for tonight's cards are sponge daubers. You're going to need 3 of them. And a sponge dauber, these have all been used when I was making the sample card. A sponge dauber is just a piece of plastic, a place for you to put your finger, and it has a sponge on the top of it. You could probably, these sponge daubers are the same consistency of a makeup sponge, so if you don't have any sponge daubers on hand, you could definitely use a makeup sponge with this technique. And so it's going to be a fun way to apply ink to our image. But I also said we are going to be creating a fun fold. So let me show you the card we're making tonight, and you're going to see that the leaves look like they have been changing colors, and I'm going to show you how you can do that with just some ink. We're really making the designer series paper, the star of the show here, because almost the entire card is made from the designer series paper, and you get to see both sides of the designer series paper. So that every single piece of a 6x6 piece of designer series paper. So this is the paper that I'm using tonight. This is the back side. It's a gorgeous sheet of paper. This comes from the All About Autumn designer series paper. It's currently out of stock, but it is coming back in stock. This has been a very popular item since the mini catalog went live at the beginning of the month. So be watching for that. You are going to need to create this card. You're going to need, as I said, a 6x6 piece of designer series paper. It can be any designer series paper. You don't have to use autumn leaves to recreate this card. You can think of it as a template that you can use to make a different card, but you do need a 6x6 piece of designer series paper. We are also going to be needing, for the inside of the card, we're going to need a piece of 5 1/4 by 4-inch piece of paper that's going on the inside of the card. And we're also going to need, for the back of the card, a piece of Cajun Craze. It's a color that goes with this particular designer series paper. So you just want to have a piece of designer series paper that's going to match, a piece of cardstock that's going to match your designer series paper. And this piece is 5.5 by 4 1/4, so it's just a quarter sheet of the cardstock. And then you need some scraps to be stamping on, and then the final thing you need, I think this is 1 3/4. Let me just check. Yes, this is a square that's 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. We're going to use that to stamp our greeting on. Okay, so let's start by putting the fun fold together, and then we can work on the stamping. So you're going to need your paper cutter for this, because what we're going to need is to cut off a 1/2 inch of our designer series paper. And I'm going to go towards the bottom where it's just leaves and some shadows, because I really want that to be, I want most of the designer series paper to be shown. So I'm going to cut off a 1/2 inch. Now all of this is going to be used for the card. And then I need this piece, we're going to use most of this. I need this to measure 5. I'm going to put the card right here on the side of the card, so just to give you an idea of where I'm talking about. So the only waste from this piece of designer series paper is this little piece of paper. So that's all the waste. So like I said, you do need that full sheet of 6 by 6 by 6. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to need to score on one side, and here's where I have to be thinking. I have to think about my orientation of my paper. I want this piece to fold over as in the front of the card, and I want this to be my front panel. So I'm going to score here at 1 1/4 inches. Make sure when you're using your scoring tool that you put your blade up, and I'm going to score right along here. And then on the other end of my designer series paper, I am going to score this at a 1/2 inch, because I need something to attach to the inside of the card. Okay, so let's put that aside. So I am going to fold over. Now when you're making a fun fold, the most important thing that you can do is have burnishing your crease marks. So you really need that nice and burnished. And then I'm going to do the same thing in here on this side as well. So it's nice and burnished. Let me just make sure. I think I changed that a little bit, so in my haste. There we go. Okay, so this is what the front of the card is going to look like, and I'm going to adhere this down with some Stampin' Seal. So there we go. So this is the front of our card. Now to create the inside of our card, I am going to be attaching this. So this right now is the same size as the piece of cardstock. I'm going to be attaching this on the side. So I'm only going to need to put my adhesive the side here. This is a super, super easy fun fold. So I'm just going to line up my card, make sure it's lined up just the way I want it to be before I press that down. So when I open it, you can see now we have a regular size card. So in the inside, so this is my inside. Remember, it has a piece that's going to go on the right hand side. So I'm going to add to this some Stampin' Seal. There we go. Get that adhesive off my paper. I hate it when I do that. But I got my handy eraser here to get up all of that adhesive so it doesn't bother me as I'm putting my card together. All right, so I'm going to take this piece of paper and I'm going to leave a little bit of the vanilla on the side so I'm not putting it right up against the edge. And I'm going to bring that down. There we go. Has a little tiny bit. Sometimes when we're putting together when we're cutting, we might not line something up. I'm just going to snip that little tiny piece off. And there we have our inside. I'm going to just add my adhesive. Okay. Give us a little border around the top and the side. Okay, our fun fold is put together. And isn't it gorgeous? I love how we're able to see both sides of the designer series paper in this design of a card. Okay, we're going to put that aside while we do some stamping. So, this is where it gets fun. So I'm going to start with my lighter color, my pumpkin. And I'm going to take my large leaf stamp and I'm going to ink this up, the dauber, with some pumpkin ink. And I'm just going to start daubing away and adding the ink to the stamp. So I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to open up some of my Cajun Craze. Do the same thing, ink it up, and craze around to some different places where it might start getting darker. And then of course we often have some green left in our leaves, so I'm using Mossy Meadow, and I'm just going to go around and I'm going to just fill in some spots with the Mossy Meadow. Now, your leaf is going to look different every single time. And don't worry if you missed a spot, because I'm going to show you what we're going to do. I'm going to huff on the stamp. That reactivates the ink. And I'm going to stamp the image right here. Okay, so you can see how cool the image looks. So I'm going to now go back in and I am just going to fill in the spots. So here's where you need to make sure you don't dip into the wrong ink pad. So I'm going to take my pumpkin, and where I still see pumpkin, I am going to just add some ink to that area. This is just going to bring out some of those colors. I'm going to take my green and do the same thing. Where I see some green, I'm okay if I go outside of the image because we're going to be cutting this out. So this will just add the color, and then I'm going to add my Cajun to the ends where the Cajun is. Okay, now we have this incredibly bright and colorful leaf, fall leaf. So I'm going to take my scissors and cut this leaf out. Now, because my ink went on the outside, which is okay even if you see it on the outside, I am going to cut right on the edges of my stamped image, and just keep moving the paper. The best way to cut an image is to not move the your scissors, but move the paper around my image. It's a great look when you can layer stamped images on your cardstock by cutting some of them out. Now, this set does have a set of dies that I could use to cut out my images, but since this is simply Stamping Sunday, we're going to work on just cutting them out because these leaves are very easy to cut out. So now I can vary the intensity of my color. So I want to show you that on the next part. I'm going to need to stamp a couple of these oak leaves. So let me just put that down so you can see it. I'm going to do the same thing. Now at this point, I have a lot of ink left on my daubers. So I'm not even going to re-ink this up. And this is going to give me a softer initial stamped image. You can see how dark the Cajun Craze still is. So I'm going to stamp it right here. And you can see that the Cajun Craze is, you can still see how dark that is. So there's 1, 2, and I can go back and in those pumpkin areas just pounce on it a little bit to bring some of that pumpkin in. I can pounce lightly so I'm not pouncing as hard, and add my other colors back in. Okay, so now I can cut this one out. I'm going to show you some lighter touches that I used with some leaves that I already stamped and hand cut out. I sometimes try to leave a little bit of an edge around the leaves to show the vanilla cardstock. I've pounced outside of the line. I'm cutting as close to the stamped image as I can. I'm leaving in a couple places some vanilla, but I don't want all of my, you can see where I pounced outside, so I don't want that to be on my leaves. So I can toss that away. So now I have those two, and they match. You can see in this card I went with a much lighter texture, so this will show you just the differences in how it will look with the darker leaves. Just have to decide how much we like it. I might do another of these leaves because I'm not sure I'm crazy about how that one came out. That's the only downside to this technique, is that you can end up stamping and doing your design more than once, so that you can, I'm just looking around for a paper towel to clean my stamp and I don't see one, so I'm just going to stamp everything off and go right back to pouncing on the stamp without even going back into the ink, because we've got lots of color left on our daubers. There we go. I'm gonna huff again, but I'm gonna go way over here so I still have room to do, oh, I like that one. Isn't that pretty how that came out? This one's really pretty. I like it a lot. So I'm just gonna pounce lightly over those rest areas, pounce a little harder, maybe add a little bit more pumpkin, pounce over that, and then pounce lightly over my green. So what do you think of this technique for stamping your images? Let me know in the chat. If you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments. So just, you know, for both, you can just leave me a comment of what you think about inking up a stamp this way by using this pounce technique with either a sponge dauber or a makeup sponge, whatever you might have on hand. It's just a little way to up your simple stamping and creating just some multicolored images, which is a lot of fun. Okay, so there's those two, and I'm really happy with both of those. This one's just a little too dark for me, so I've left some room on the paper to stamp another maple leaf. So again, I'm just going to make sure I get some of that ink off. I am going to put on some more ink, but pounce very lightly. So I'm putting some of that pumpkin in the middle. I'm going to put some of the moss heading outwards. And then I'm going to put some of this towards the end of the leaves. I could use any fall colors on this. So let's fit this on. There we go. Oh, I'm much happier with this now. It's not as dark and as the other one was. So I'm just going to add some of that orange, come in with a little bit of green, come back with a little bit more orange, and then put a little bit more of the copper around. Much happier. You can see the difference between the two, and I'm much happier with the lighter version. So let me close up these ink pads before I cut that one out. And I think this matches these better than the really dark one. You can see I did cut out more leaves. I'll put them right down here so you can see them. So I have a bunch to use later on. I'll add this one to it in case I want to do a card that's really dark. But these are the three I'm going to use today on the card. And the rest will be, the rest of what we have to do will be quick. We still have to stamp our greeting. So what's your favorite thing to do in fall? Are you an apple picker? Do you like to get apples and do some canning of applesauce, apple pies, all of that good stuff? Are you more of a hiker in the fall? Tell me in the comments what's your favorite thing to do about fall. I love being outdoors in the fall. Before I had my back injury, I loved to hike. I loved to hike in the White Mountains during the fall when you just, you'd come to these places, especially on the Zealand Trail. That was one of my favorite, where you would just be able to look out into the gorge and see all of the beauty of the colors here in New Hampshire. And so that was something I used to do before I had my back injury. Now I just love to be outside and take in the beautiful warm days and the crisp nights, and have fun with that. Okay, let's get some things out of the way, and we have a small piece of paper that still needs to be stamped. And we are going to be using our Cajun Craze. And I'm going to be stamping the appropriate sentiment that reads, let me just get it centered. Autumn teaches us that change can be beautiful. Isn't that perfect for this card? So now on the front of my card, we just need to start arranging things. So I want to just see how I want this to go. I have one sneaking through in the back. I think I'm going to want this one. Well, let's see. I put this here, and this one here, and then my saying, I think I'm going to trim my saying a little bit too. Make it just a little smaller. We've got a lot of space. There we go. I like that a little better. All right, so let's start putting our adhesive down. I'm not going to press hard on this yet because I want to make sure I have the leaves where I want them to be. So I think this was the one I was going to put on the front. And this is the one I'm going to tuck in behind. And then let's add our greeting. And there to just move a little bit. There we go. So here we have tonight's card. This is the card that I made, and I rubbed in my colors a little more. Here I did more dabbing, so you can see there's a little difference in the color, but they both show just the beauty of autumn. So let me just put these aside, and let's put out the cards that we made this month with the autumn stamp set. So we have this one from this week. We have this one from last week. And we have this one from last week. And this one from our first week in fall. So those are the 4 fall cards we made during September. So for the month of October, we are going to be using a really fun set called the Pick of the Patch. And this is such a multi-use set. We have greetings that could fit Thanksgiving, greetings that fit Halloween, for thank you, you're the pick of the patch, cutie pie. So we have a lot of great sentiments that go into this set. We also have a tree with no leaves on it. We have a little plant here, some little maple leaves. We have a gourd. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of pumpkins. We have our leaves, our vines, our stem, and a crow. So this is the stamp set we're going to be using, and we are going to be using Crumb Cake, Cajun Craze. Let me just look at my colors again. So we're going to be using Crumb Cake, Cajun Craze. We're going to be using Pumpkin Pie and Basic Black. So those are the colors that we'll be using. I will put this all in the comments, and I will put a link to my website and the codes if you want to order any of this. So we're 2 months. So I think only the black ink pad might be your only different ink pads you'd have to buy. And I am going to be using paper from the Them Bones suite. So we're going to be using a couple of sheets of paper from in here, and this has some great Halloween and fall different papers. And I am going to use one piece of paper from the Autumn, All About Autumn Designer Series paper, and I'm going to show you a special technique this month, towards the end of the month, and that's what October looks like. So if you're interested in ordering to stamp along, I'll give you the information. If not, if you have any set with pumpkins in it, if you have any Halloween type paper or designer series paper that matches those colors, you'll be set and you can stamp right along with us. So I hope you have a great week. That's it for me tonight, and I hope to see you Friday for Simply Stamping Sunday. I'm going to do one more design with the Autumn Leaves bundle, and then next Sunday, it will be Pick of the Batch. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.